Alrighty, here we are. Let's go ahead and we'll wait a couple minutes. We'll let a couple people join on in, and we will get started from there. So, as people are joining, welcome everyone. Welcome to Clarity That Matters, building a shared language for measurable impact. Today, our webinar is going to look a little bit different. So excited for the time together today to learn more about how creating clarity at your church and working together to be a collaborative space between your church staff can lead to incredible results. So, taking a little bit of a step away from direct product related things today to talk a little bit more about consultation and how you can make successful moments with your church. Of course, we'll draw a lot of stuff back to the Tithely product and everything like that. So, welcome on in, everyone. Hope everyone's having a wonderful day. Depending on where you're calling in from around the world, I don't know if it's hot where you are, but I am located here in the southeast in Kentucky, and let me tell you, it's screaming hot these days. So if it's like that where you are, hope you're staying cool, your AC is working well, and summer is going good for you. So welcome on in, everyone. I see we've got several people joining us, so thanks so much for joining on in. We'll go ahead and jump on in and get started. So, like I said, today, clarity that matters. So, clarity that matters, a moment for us to build some shared language for measurable impact, to talk about how your teams work well together to create some movement on initiatives and actually get some stuff done. Like I've been working with churches now in the Tithely context for over 7 years, and I see all the time that there are good ideas that never quite come to fruition because sometimes communication is not great, execution of that is not great. It just takes a while to get done. So that's what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about strategies and how to get that, things happening at your church. So, Matt, go ahead and go over to the next slide, and we'll do some introductions. My name's Mark. I work within our customer success team here at Tithely. I've been working at Tithely for over 7 years now, partnering with churches just like you all to build impact with Tithely tools and just to see impact across the board within your staff and within projects and initiatives. Always an honor to do that alongside you all. And then we have Matt here from MJW Solutions. And Matt, I'll go ahead and let you introduce yourself.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Mark, so much for allowing me to hop on this call. And thank you, everybody that's joining today. Again, just here to provide value and hope that we can learn how to, provide better clarity and alignment across our church and the different ideas that we are striving to do, and really to maximize our impact. I am Matt. I'm part of MJW Solutions, my own business, where I really work with organizations, church leaders, and businesses to help them bridge that middle ground between strategy and real execution. And we're going to dive a little bit deeper into what that looks like today. And I'm just really honored to be here with you guys and help provide some immediate value and answer any questions that you have.
Awesome, awesome. Well, thanks, Matt. So yeah, Matt, tell me a little bit more. So, tell me about kind of how you got into this, kind of why you feel as though churches need this assistance to move from good ideas to execution, from strategy to execution, like you were saying. So, just tell us a little bit more about what got you into it and why you think it's such a need in churches today.
Absolutely. So, born and raised in church, always have been. It's always run in my blood. At the age of 7, joined a ministry called Bible Quizzing, where we were memorizing up to 500 verses every single year and competing across the country with different churches just to maximize our understanding of the Word of God and to really understand who He is and how He serves us or how we serve Him well. And I did that for about 11 years, eventually became a coach for about 5, and then eventually became the director for the state of Tennessee, where I am now, where we grew that from 2 teams to 14 teams competing nationally across
Cool.
the country. And that just kind of fed into my heart for ministry. I was always the guy that people would come to help lead different youth events, retreats, whatever it may be, and just say, hey, how do we actually move things forward? How do we engage our community? How do we help get
Mm,
things, people in the doors where they can not only feel the love of Christ, but they can feel the love of us and each other and help pour into them and the things that they do. So that's always been a big heartbeat of mine is that ministry aspect.
cool.
Professionally, I started out with my family business and Dale Carnegie training. So anything soft skills related, how to win friends and influence people, team dynamic,
Yeah.
leadership coaching, all of that was running through my blood, through the family business. Then I eventually moved to Nashville, where I had the privilege of working with the Dave Ramsey team for about 6 years. So I
Cool.
started out on the Financial Peace University team, where I had the privilege of leading business strategy with churches and pastors across the country for multiple years. And that was a real heartbeat and privilege to just work directly with pastors and churches on not only helping them understand how to instill the idea of stewardship and financial health across their church,
Mm,
but also just how to maximize their impact and how to be better managers and stewards of the resources that God has given them. And that was always a big heartbeat of what I love to do. Then at Ramsey, I created my own role where I was able to serve as a consultant for the executives across the teams, really helping them translate strategy into real executed growth. And that was something that really
mm,
ignited my desire to start a business. And that's really what's driven me to where I am today. So, did that role for a couple of years, eventually moved into a director of partnerships role with churches and organizations of all sizes across the country. And then eventually God nudged me and said, "Hey, I want to expand your capacity to serve me better and to steward your resources better. I want you to start your own business and really focus on serving businesses and churches across the country." And that's what I do now. Left Ramsey and told him I loved him, but I physically
mm.
manage both and am now in a place where I get the privilege of serving, organizations just like you guys every day, with really, maximizing their impact, and for churches really expanding their capacity for ministry. We're going to talk through a
Awesome.
little bit more what that looks like.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, that's great. I think we had something similar here. It was called Bible Bowl,
Yeah,
to Bible
yeah, I've heard
quiz.
it. Yeah.
So maybe about the same. Well, awesome. I think here at Tithely, we've always strived to walk alongside and assist each one of you all as you are working to serve your congregation. You'll see like on our Tithely website and everything, like we have a slogan called Simply Serve because we desire to simply serve you as you are serving your community, your church, your neighborhood. And so this is part of it. We want to simply serve you and walk alongside you and equip you with the resources that you need to grow your community, to execute and get things done. So that's the purpose of today's call, to give you real ways to do that at your church. And we brought in Matt Winter here, who's going to help us with some experience working with churches just like you all, and getting that done, and to give you some strategies. So I'm going to hand it on over to Matt. Matt's going to lead us through this next section. I may pop in a time or two, but I'm going to hand it on over to Matt. He's going to talk through some of those strategies.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Mark, so much for that introduction and for setting up this call so well. Again, everybody on the call, today's purpose is to really add value to you, to help you come away with something that you can apply today with your team and your churches. And then, if there's opportunities to dive deeper into your church specifically, and there's a way for me to provide value to you, I'm always happy to provide that support alongside Mark and the Tidely team and the things that we're doing today. So, let's go ahead and jump into what the agenda looks like. We're going to talk through a couple of different key topics, each one building on each other a little bit more, really designed again to help you start to drive for that clarity and impact, where ideas start to really become action, and you start to see the needle move, you start to see growth happening, and you really help able to solve the right problems for your team and your church. So we're going to talk about the common frustration in churches. We're going to talk about crafting a shared language. What does it look like to solve a symptom versus a root problem? What does it look like to have a aligned transformation and desired future that can translate not throughout only your team, but also the members of the congregation, so that they understand what role they play. They understand the role that they can make an impact in the church, beyond just giving. They can be able to understand what role they can do to move that transformation forward. We'll talk about what it looks like to unlock your margin for ministry, and then at the end of the session, Mark and I will answer any questions that you guys have, go a little bit deeper into any specific needs that you're seeing in your organization, and really just again provide value however we can. So as we're going throughout this, there'll be a couple of opportunities for you to engage in the chat, add a couple of thoughts or questions, and I encourage you to do that. We want to make sure that throughout this session, you guys are served well, and we're answering any key questions that you have as we go through it. So let's start with one of the core things here is that, again, we are all managers of God's resources. We are all stewards of the things that He has given us. And it is required that, with those things that we've been given, we must prove faithful, right? And we must do with what we've been given the most that we can. And really, my goal when working with churches and organizations is to help them maximize that capacity, help them really maximize their ability to manage and steward their resources well, whether it be people, money, time, skills, etc. Again, we are all His, and we just want to serve His community and His impact and His kingdom well. Now, working with churches and organizations, some of the times these are things that sound familiar. Now, again, these are just examples, but not necessarily related directly to your church, but just common themes that we hear when teams are trying to turn strategy into action. So, one is, hey, we're growing, but ministry feels scattered and reactive. We have staff and volunteers, but maybe we're not moving in complete sync. We're doing a lot of different things. We're very busy, but we're not seemingly going in the same direction. And sometimes we're wasting time, we're wasting work, and we're just trying to figure out how to all move in the same place. We're busy doing ministry, but not always moving toward the mission. The vision is often clear, but we're not sure how to make it a reality. Our systems and tools weren't built for where we're headed. Maybe they're working today, but they're not working at scale. They're not working in a way that can be repeatable. And then maybe if you're the pastor or you're the executive pastor, you're an admin, whatever it may be, maybe you're handling too much personally. You're just trying to focus on the big picture, trying to really think more broadly across the organization to understand how do we maximize our capacity to serve Christ better and to serve his community better. And again, these are just examples of common problems that people feel where, we're moving, we have direction, we have ideas, we have different things that we want to do, but oftentimes it feels like we can't just really get it moving. We can't really see growth happen. We can't really see that needle start to move. And we want to understand how to really turn these ideas into realized action. And this is a common frustration where most churches have a lot of vision. They have a lot of calling. They have a lot of mission and understanding of where they want to go. But they oftentimes, and businesses are the same way, they oftentimes deal with that pesky little X in the middle where they're blocked from that ability to have real execution and follow through. And oftentimes it's caused by some type of misalignment, whether at the leadership level, at the membership level, or a mixture of both, where you're not necessarily rowing in the same direction, or you're not necessarily tying the activities that you were driving towards a consistent theme or outcome that you're wanting to achieve, that everyone can rally around. And it feels like you get to a point where you have a lot of strategy, you have a lot of vision, but you often feel like you're having the same conversation 6 months later and nothing has moved. And the idea is that we want to work together to really bridge that middle ground where that misalignment is no longer there. It's no longer an obstacle. And that line between vision and calling and strategy can really be clearly directly tied to that execution and follow through. And that's really a lot of what we're going to dive into here. But oftentimes, when you have this common frustration, it creates what I call the perception gap. And I know we've all experienced this before, either as leaders or even as members of churches themselves, where church leadership will say things like, we want to build a building, or we need volunteers next month, or we need to increase our giving, or we're bringing new tools to the church. All great things, all aligned towards some type of vision, some type of overall strategy they want to achieve. But when it's not tied to a very clear so what or outcome that or transformation that the church is trying to achieve, the congregation may hear, oh, they're about to ask us for money, right? We're about to do a campaign. There goes my weekend. What will this be used for? Is this really going to be helpful? And this is a common misalignment where the vision doesn't often translate into an understood action. That so what doesn't exist, to where when you say you want to build a building, it's to achieve a greater transformation versus as a member, you feel, oh, I'm about to have to open the pocketbook and we're going to build a building. But what are we actually going to achieve that we can't achieve today by having that building? And that really gets into the importance of having that so what and having that aligned action of what this is going to allow us to do today, tomorrow that we can't do today. And one of the most common things that I see across organizations that I work with is what I call the wheel without an axle. Basically, it's the difference between an activity versus an outcome. And, if you want to throw in the chat a quick yes or thumbs up, if this feels like your task list, where every week you're looking at different things of, I've got to host 3 community events, or I have to send 12 donor emails this week, or distribute 500 flyers, post 5 times on social media, or even apply for 4 grants. I know for a long time this felt like my task list where I was constantly in this mode of wanting to check off as many things as I could. And I would get to the end of the week and say, well, I did a lot of things, but did it actually move the needle? Did it actually make a difference in any way of what I was trying to achieve in my job or my business, whatever it is? And I feel very busy, but I don't feel accomplished. And this is a very common theme that organizations deal with when they're trying to move things forward, to where there's a lot of busyness and activity, but it's often not tied to an outcome. And one of the immediate things that you can really focus on today is to start to identify when things are an activity versus something that's an outcome that's going to drive impact. For example, instead of hosting 3 community events, what if we rally the team around the idea of, hey, how do we increase community event attendance by 20%? Instead of distributing 500 flyers, what if it's, hey, how do we get 75% of the locals to become aware of our church? Instead of applying for 4 grants, it's, hey, how do we secure $100,000 in non-tithing funding? And what this immediately does is it not only gives a clear action or impact for the leadership team to understand where we're heading, but it also gives creative liberty to the team and the organization and even the members to understand various ways that we could solve this problem. To where hosting 3 events or applying for 4 grants or distributing 500 flyers, those are great things that are going to be one of the ways that we can solve these outcomes, but it opens up the creative license for everyone to think about what are the other 25 ways that we can do that. But it's all tied towards a specific outcome that you're trying to drive and that you as a leadership team can measure. And that's really a big important part is that you're able to measure your progress and know if that busyness, that activity, and those things you're striving to do actually move the needle for your team. And this is a common misalignment where activities are efforts, but outcomes are really the evidence that something actually moved. And that's what we're really going to dive deeper into here. At the end of the day, when you're talking about activities versus outcomes, you're talking about bridging that middle ground gap between strategy and execution. It all comes down to creating a shared language across the church that not only can your leadership team align around, but you can also use to translate actions and questions and requests and whatever it may be to unleash the membership as well. To understand, hey, how do we as a collective organization, as a collective body, all work together to achieve the transformation that we want to achieve. And the membership and the congregation, along with the teams and leadership, are all speaking that same language. And it really comes down to creating an environment where your strategy, your people, and your systems are all striving in a way that is unified to where you know where you're going and you're then translating that to the people that are accountable, whether volunteers, part-time, full-time, whomever it may be, and you're then supporting those people by systems that can help support not only the internal growth of what they're doing, but also be a system that can provide insights into what that next strategy needs to look like. So it all comes down to creating that alignment, that momentum, and that structure to where working together, our goal was to always be getting one step closer to that middle ground where that aligned growth begins to happen. Now, let me pause here for a second because I know we've talked about a lot very quickly. In the chat, I'd love for you guys to just put a quick idea of these 3 buckets, strategy, people, and systems. Which is the one that tends to create the most friction in the organization? Which is the one that tends to be the one that kind of gets in the way oftentimes? That if you could solve it, it would really help unleash your capacity for ministry. I'll give you guys, 5 or 10 seconds to add that in the chat, and then we'll keep going. Perfect. All right. So as we move forward, keep these 3 buckets in your mind because this is really going to be the engine that drives this growth. This is really going to be that core foundation that we're building on to understand how do you bridge these 3 things together. So what does it look like to draft a shared language? This is, again, the core of everything we're doing. And what we're talking about today is really in that strategy side because without a clear strategy, without a clear understanding of where you're going and why, the people and systems become even more difficult because people need to rally around the direction you're going, and the systems need to simply support the efforts of what you're driving. So at the beginning of everything that you're doing, it really comes down to first crafting that shared language for the strategy itself. And when I'm working with organizations, it really comes down to 4 specific questions that we help answer for the teams. It's one, where do we want to be or transform into within a specific time frame? This is often quarterly to begin. It can be annual, it can be 6 months, whatever it is. This becomes that aligned transformation of what you're wanting to achieve as a church. And we'll talk through an example of what that looks like. The next part is what's standing in our way from that vision becoming a reality? What are those core root problems that are just always standing in our way, that are they're stopping us from achieving the thing that we want to do. And the fun part of this is that as a church leadership team and as a church body, there's always 100 problems to solve, right? Whether you're running a business or not, whatever it may be, there's always 100 things to do, 100 things to solve. The idea is to get to a point where you understand, yes, but if this is the transformation we want to achieve, what are the most important 3 to 4 problems that we have to solve that are the best chance of us achieving that transformation we want to have? And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. What must we do to overcome these problems? And then ultimately, what will we have by making these problems go away? These become those tangible outcomes that you can look at, you can measure, you can celebrate, you can report back to the congregation and say, hey guys, here's what we've achieved, here's where we're going, here's where we're on or off track, and we're really starting to move the needle in transformation of where we're wanting to go. And when you're thinking about this shared language, that transformation becomes your desired future. The things in the way become your problems. The what we must do become the core objectives. Again, the most important things that you must solve as a church to achieve that transformation. And then the things that we will have, the key results or the outcomes that we want to achieve. So let me pause here for a second. Within your organization today, I'd love for you guys to just drop in the chat of these 4 things, whether it comes to, having a clear desired future, knowing what problems to solve, knowing kind of those core objectives or even the key results. Which one do you feel like you do really well? Which is the one that you feel like today you do a really great job at outlining kind of that desired future, what you want to transform into? Or maybe it's, hey, we do a really good job at measuring what we're doing and translating that into an outcome. Just go ahead and drop in the chat of these 4. Which one do you feel like you do really well today as a church leadership team? We'll take a couple of seconds there and then we'll keep moving. Perfect. All right. So let's zoom into this for a second because just answering these 4 questions I have found is a huge unlock for organizations because not only does it identify key obstacles that are standing in the way, but it also brings focus. One of the biggest kryptonites of an organization growing is a lack of focus. And oftentimes that comes from a lack of clarity and misalignment, especially when your resources are smaller or you're not able to really invest into 14 different places. You want to know, hey, what are the most important things for us to solve? So one of the things that I'd love to dive into is the problems. And a pretty smart guy once said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'd spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I have experienced many different times where I've sat in a meeting, a board meeting or a leadership meeting, whatever it is, and it felt like for 45 minutes we talked about all these different ideas and all these different cool things that we could do as a church. But someone eventually raise their hand and say, what problem are we actually trying to solve? What is the thing we're actually trying to achieve as an organization that we can start to filter all of these different solutions through? And that's really what I want to talk about here is that when you're going through these 4 questions and you're starting to draft that shared language, one of the most important key pieces of that is that you understand the problems you're actually trying to solve as a team and you're translating that from a symptom to a root problem that you want to solve. So for example, let's look at this here. Church giving is down. We've all felt this. You've sat in a leadership meeting, you've sat in the even talking to the congregation, whatever it is, and you're looking at your metrics, your dashboard, whatever it is, and you're saying, "Man, church giving is down. Let's go solve this problem." And suddenly everybody starts to throw out a lot of different ideas, a lot of different things that we could do, a lot of different activities, all great things for us to do. But there's still that underlying problem of, well, church giving is down, but why? Like, what is actually the root problem that's solving that? And are all of these activities that we're talking about doing actually going to be something that gets us to a point where church giving is going up? And one of the quickest ways that you can take this back to your team today, and there's a variety of ways you can do this, but one of the simplest ways that I have found is just to ask your team, well, why? Well, few members are giving consistently. Well, why is that happening? Well, they haven't set up recurring giving. Oh, that's interesting. Well, why haven't they set up recurring giving? Well, we haven't asked or made it simple. Oh, that's interesting. So church giving is down because we don't have a lot of people doing recurring giving, but the reality is we haven't even asked them to do it. So they may not even know that it's something that is available to them for them to do it across the team, across the congregation. Well, why haven't we asked them? Well, we don't have a consistent communication plan or a tool that we can use to even execute on that. Well, why? Well, we lack clear giving goals or assigned ownership. In fact, our root problem is not the church giving is down. Our root problem is that we don't have anyone owning it, and we have unclear tools or goals on how to support consistent giving. Within 30 seconds, you as a team have gone from a symptom that church giving is down, and you're now in a place where you say, oh, wait, the real problem to solve is that we don't have the tools, ownership, or plan on how to actually effectively communicate the need for consistent stewardship and giving across our church. How do we go solve that problem, right? How do we start really utilize our resources in a way that we can solve that so that this symptom that we stated originally starts to become something that's solved and we move the needle on that. So tying this back to, clarity versus action, right? Those activities versus the outcomes. What does this actually look in real life? So let's say you go back to those 4 questions. You're now trying to steer from an activity to an outcome, and you're saying, okay, I know kind of what the problem is that I want to solve. Here's an example of those two different worlds and what typically looks like an organization today, and then translating that into what a more mature organization looks like when they start to move to more outcome-based type planning. So, for example, let's say the activity is, hey, we need to post more volunteer opportunities on social media. This is a great activity, right? This is definitely something we need to consistently do. But today, when you go back to your team and you start to work with others that are driving different or objectives or driving different projects, whatever it may be, when you start to hear things like this, I want you to ask yourself a couple of questions. One, what problem is this solving, right? Because what often happens is that a lot of people are busy. There's a lot of activity that's happening, but very commonly it's not tied to a specific problem that's being solved. So you go back to that wheel without an axle, you have a lot of wheels running in a few different directions, but they're not necessarily directed or connected in a way that's driving towards unified growth. So always be asking yourself, what problem is this solving? What outcome are we measuring? How do we know um, if we've successfully posted more volunteer opportunities on social media? What do we want that to accomplish? What are we asking people to do? How many posts are we having? Which social media platform? How do we know if we're successful, right? How do we know if posting on social media actually moved the needle? And then what are some other ways that we can solve this? Maybe at the end of the day, we just want more volunteer opportunities. But does it have to be social media? Can it be a few other different ways? And how do we know if we were successful in accomplishing that? And this is a very common trap that organizations fall into is where they have a lot of activities like this, where we need to post this, we need to send out flyers, we need to print out more handouts, but they oftentimes don't step back and say, okay, what problem are we actually solving? And when you start to get into this exercise, start to get into this rhythm as a leadership team, you very quickly start to eliminate wasteful activities. And you immediately start to expand your capacity and resources to focus more time and efforts on the things that actually move the needle. So let's translate this from an activity to an actual outcome. Instead of posting more opportunities on social media, what if it was, hey, how do we rebuild a consistent and effective volunteer sign up pipeline? Again, now you've opened up a whole new realm of creativity. Now you've started to really think about a larger, broader objective that you want to achieve. Well, how do we know we were successful? Well, we would launch a mobile-friendly sign-up form that can have, completion time within less than 2 minutes. We can achieve 25 volunteer signups from the first time contacts in 60 days, or we can improve the follow-through rate from sign up to first volunteer from 40 to 60%. Within a few bullet points, not only have you created a very consistent and understood action of where you're wanting to go that has a real measured impact, but you've also unleashed the team and people that are working on this to say, oh, I know exactly what role I play in this, whether I'm a member, a congregant, or I'm a leadership, or I'm an XP, whatever it is. I know that, well, we're trying to rebuild a consistent, effective volunteer sign up pipeline. And my role is to help with key result number one, where I know that we have to think about all the different ways that we can help a volunteer sign up in a mobile friendly way within 2 minutes or less. What are all of the different ways that we can accomplish that, that I can maximize and use my skill sets to help achieve it, that we can also measure? And then as a leadership team, you know exactly what we're trying to accomplish. So at the core of starting to align those three buckets of strategy, people, and systems towards that middle ground of aligned growth, at the core foundation, it really gets into this concept of outcome-based planning to where you have measured impact of what you're trying to achieve, and you're providing creative liberty to the team to have ownership and an understood action of what they need to do to accomplish that. So if you take nothing else from this conversation and nothing else from what we talk about here, today, one of the things that I would recommend that you start to do with your teams immediately is with every activity, every project, every request for investment, every idea that you have, just when you start to hear these different things, just quickly ask yourself again, what problem is this solving? How will we know if it's solved? How are we going to measure this? And what are some other ways that we've tried to solve this before? And you will immediately start to recognize things that are not actually going to move the needle in any shape or form. And you'll immediately start to expand that capacity and that usage of resources today, for the team. So in the chat, we'll pause for a second. In the chat, I'd love for you guys just to quickly say, of these, like which one excites you the most? Which is the one that feels like, man, if we could just know kind of what problems that we're solving, are we really have a hard time measuring different things and we'd really love to accomplish that. Which of these excites you the most to just know, man, it would be awesome if we could actually answer that question and we feel like it would really help move the needle as a team. And then we'll continue on and start to land the plane on what this looks like in real life, both with Tithely and with the organization as a whole. So we'll take 5 or 6 seconds here, drop that in the chat, and then we'll continue forward. Perfect. See some chats coming in there. Awesome. All right. So let's start to bring this home. So one of the things that I always love to say when working with teams from any different organization, whether it's church, business, etc., is when you're looking at creating strategy and translating that into action, always fall in love with solving the problem, not just finding the solution. And this one thing alone will dramatically transform the way that you operate as a team because you will actually be solving root cause issues that are that are becoming a stumbling block for the organization and not just solving the symptoms that are creating what feels like that constant wheel of busyness, that constant wheel of activity across the team. So let's talk about what this actually looks like. What would it look like if you had this shared language? You answered those 4 key questions, and now you're standing in front of the congregation and presenting to them the desired future, the plan to advance the church. Where are we going? What are we going to do? How are we going to measure it? And how do we, as a complete collective body, move this forward? And what role do they play in it, right? Everyone loves to live in a world that they helped create. And part of what this shared language allows you to do is to give people clarity of what role they play in that world. And it gives people clarity to understand that they don't have to just come to church on a Sunday. There are things that they can do to move the needle and help support the church holistically with a measured understanding. So when I'm working with churches and organizations, one of the things that we do when creating those 4 key questions is we create what I call a desired future dashboard. Again, this becomes that core filter that you begin to move all decisions through, you begin to prioritize things through, and you use as a way to help you know when to say yes and when to say no or not now to things that are coming on your plate. Because there's always new ideas, there's always new problems to solve, but this becomes that common filter that you can use to help bring everybody towards that shared language. So across the top here, we have our transformation statement, right? That goes back to where do we want to transform into in this period of time? And then across the bottom, we have our objective. What is that core thing that we want to do that is solving some type of root problem that we've identified that is one of the biggest things standing in the way of us achieving that transformation? And then again, one of the most important parts, and my personal favorite, how are we going to measure this? How are we going to track this consistently and keep people accountable towards driving this forward? And you essentially would have, 2 to 4 of these to where these become your core focus. This becomes the thing that you're always holding in your hand to say, well, does this thing, does this activity, does this new tool, does this new idea, does this new campaign, whatever it may be, do any of these things drive back to this larger transformation that we are trying to achieve and the way in which we're going to measure it? And then each of these has an owner. You have a captain, somebody that's helping drive each objective, that is helping make sure that it gets moved. It has accountability, it has vision, and you're bringing not only the leadership team through this, but you're also making sure that the members understand where we're at, where we're on or off track, and what role they play in that. So I'll give you guys a real example And then I'll pass it over to Mark to talk about, hey, how does Tithely play into this? What are some of those interconnected things to where those tools help bring that action forward? So let's just say that you're a church and your desired future is that by the end of 2025, you want to become a recognized foundation of the community. You maintain unified ministries fully equipped to actively engage and serve, and that's going to result in an extraordinary ability to share the love of Jesus. Again, this becomes that shared, aligned transformation that not only is the leadership team aligned to, but the membership is aligned to as well. And everyone across the entire church understands that now, when we're doing different things, outside of just running the church operations, when we're doing different things, this is what we're trying to achieve. This is where we're trying to go. This is the transformation we're trying to achieve. And one of the ways that we're going to do that is we're going to nurture a strong sense of purpose and stewardship among our members. We know we'll have done that if we increase our annual operating budget from X to X by this time. If we have, X number of members in regular Bible studies, if we have, 25% of the congregation actively involved in general programs, and the way in which we would solve or accomplish these objectives can come from 100 different activities. Again, this goes back to that activity versus outcome-based planning to where these are the North Stars. These are the things that are saying, hey, are we off track or on track when it comes to averaging 35 people in regular Bible studies? If not, what are the different ways that we can help increase that attendance? Maybe it's we need to modernize our communication to improve awareness and engagement. Maybe you're in a high traffic area where you have a lot of new people visiting or a lot of people touristing or vacationing in that area, and it's, hey, how do we increase our engagement or our promotion across the community so that they can know about us, they can learn about us, and we can have an opportunity to serve them. We'll know we did that if we can increase our followers from X to X. If we can not only host a community event every quarter, but we can do it with an average of 50 people. If we can increase our worship attendance from 200 to 500. And again, these are the outcomes that you want to achieve by modernizing communication and engagement so that you can again be recognized as the foundation of the community. And then lastly, how do we expand our capacity to serve? Volunteers, life classes, a building plan, a campaign, whatever it is, all of these things become that common language, that shared language to where when you stand in front of the congregation and you say, hey, we need volunteers, we need to increase our giving, we want to build a building, we want to raise money for a capital campaign, we want to create life classes that everybody can serve, that serves the whole person. You can say, because remember, we want to host one life class every quarter within the community because we want to expand our capacity to serve the community because our so what is that we want to be recognized as a foundation of the community. And this is going to allow us to enhance our ability to share the love of Jesus. And it begins to create that understanding all the way up to the top of, oh, this isn't just a strategy. This is an aligned transformation that we collectively are going to achieve. And I understand what role I play in it, and I understand how it's going to be measured. So let me pause here for a second and pass this over to Mark to talk about, hey, let's say we've created this strategy. We've done this thing. We've got this really cool shared language. Where does Tithely come into this, right? What are some examples in which Tithely can help support this, and how do those two connect together? So, Mark, let me pass it over to you for a second and talk through that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Matt. No, I mean, I think that like so often, right? Like in churches, we will see people create, I just like Matt said, right? Like those key results, those things. It's like I want this run this kind of event. I want to move attendance from this to this. I want generosity to go from this to, right? All of that. So it's defining those, and then you got to land the plane, right? You got to say like, how are we actually doing that? So this is where Tidely comes in, works to equip you with the resources that you have. You guys are probably you guys are all Tithely customers. And so you have these tools at your fingertips of ways that you could actually accomplish those things. So the things that we talked about, right? Like maybe an annual operating budget, building and maintaining some Bible studies, some community events, volunteers, building plans, creating that shared language. So this is where Tithely comes in. Go ahead and go to the next one. This is where, you have that annual operating budget by leveraging some of Tithely's giving tools and funds, being able to allocate funds in a certain way so that you're seeing that budget grow, having people commit to doing recurring gifts within Tithely so that you can have commitments towards that annual operating budget, Bible studies, and having them grow through maybe like a CHMS program where you could create groups and you could create attendance categories and things like that, but also sermon notes and utilizing the church app within your church community events like registration pages on your websites and building out events within your church management system, having volunteer scheduling, settling up groups, doing how you're communicating with them, campaign tools, emails and text. There's just so much, right? Like as you start to think through the things that you're wanting to accomplish at your church and you begin to bring them down to what are those tangible things that we'd like to accomplish, that means that we're accomplishing the top level, right? We're getting at our objective. Tithely can kind of walk alongside you in building out what does that tangibly look like to be applicable within your church, right? Each church is different. Maybe for you, that looks like building out those giving tools. And maybe for you, that looks like setting up a volunteer registration or a volunteer management or building out these huge community events. Everyone's different, right? And that's why we create tools that can work for churches of all sizes. So Tithely works to create clarity there through building out different areas of their product. I like to throw this slide in just to show you the different products that Tithely has. You may be using one or two of these, maybe you're using all of them, which is amazing. But Tithely offers a very large suite of products here across giving, church management, church apps, church websites. I mean, all kinds of things. And so you have them at your fingertips as Tithely customers. And so if you want to know more about any of those or how to leverage any of those, you can always email us at support@tithes.ly and we'll be happy to equip you with those resources that you need. Maybe you can always drop a question here for us to address at the end as well. But Tithely is really here to simply serve you and walk alongside you as you're working to accomplish some of those key results. So I just want to jump in and say that Tithely is here to walk alongside you and to make those things actually happen at your church with the tools that we provide you. So hand it back over to you, Matt, to keep landing that plane.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mark, and thank you again for what you guys do at Tithely, and again, just really providing that solid foundation, right? That infrastructure that allows a church to translate that strategy into real executed growth, and they have the ability to have recurring giving, have the people, have the management, have the volunteers, whatever it is. Everything that we're talking about today is to really provide additional value to you as a church to help you expand that capacity for impact from your strategy to your tools to your systems, whatever it is. We want to make sure that you are equipped to really maximize your ability to spread the love of Christ and make that community impact across your teams and across the people you work with. So let's go ahead and land the plane here on what does this actually look like? You have that transformation. Now, how do you execute it, right? How do you actually make this a thing? And what's the importance behind it? So we've talked about, having no shared language oftentimes feels like a misaligned leadership. You have a lot of different programs that feel scattered. They feel like they're all kind of running their own thing, but they're not connected. You have a lot of staff that maybe are getting burnt out or volunteers that are getting burnt out because they're doing a lot of activity, but it's oftentimes not translated back to that real measured outcome you want to achieve. You have systems that feel disconnected. Maybe you're missing opportunities because you're just so busy in the weeds on different things that aren't actually moving the needle, that you're not able to get to the other things that could actually help you progress faster. And you feel like you're constantly in reaction mode. This is a very common feeling across churches, businesses, nonprofits, whatever it is, where you want to get to that place where you're proactive, you're not reactive, you're able to think ahead, you're able to catch things before they happen and really start to think more strategically to where, that shared language becomes aligned transformation, purposeful ministry, teams with clear outcomes, tools to support the mission, strategic growth, and sustainable rhythms. Everything that we're talking about here is not a one-time thing. This becomes a behavior. This becomes a consistency that you're driving throughout your church, throughout your planning, and all the things that you're doing at all times. And you consistently get better and better at it. So to kind of land the plane here, we talked in the beginning on that engine, that strategy, the people, and the systems. How do you bring that to an aligned growth? What does that actually look like in the day to day? What does it actually look like with the church as you're moving through your day-to-day operations? So on the strategy side, it may look like, hey, how do we translate ministry vision into weekly actionable focus? How do we address root cause problems, not just the symptoms that are keeping us from being stuck and growing? And then really one of the most important, how do we unify the team and congregation around a common direction and lens in which we're using to make decisions, right? How do we bridge that perception gap to where when they're asked for something or we're presenting something, they understand and are aligned to the lens that we're using to drive that decision. When it comes to people, how do we create simple ways to define and track success, right? How do we celebrate it? How do we create a world where the culture is celebrating the wins that we're having and we're able to see things quickly where we're off or on track and be able to adjust accordingly? How do we establish shared expectations and weekly follow through? And then how do we prevent burnout with a healthy, predictable ministry cadence? And then lastly, from the system side, how do the systems come alongside that and support this growth to really enhance and increase the effectiveness of the people and the strategy? This looks like building structure through consistent rhythms and meetings. This looks like simple systems that keep priorities front and center, just like Tithely, just like we talked about, whether it's campaigns, texting, emails, CHMS, whatever it is, how do we create tools and systems that keep that visibility consistent? And then how do we consistently create this behavior where these practices are sustained and aligned throughout the year? And this is really the core areas in which I love to help churches and organizations create that behavior and create this language that turns rhythm into action and turns strategy into aligned growth across what they're doing. So start to close out here. Clarity is powerful, but aligned clarity reinforced by rhythm and behavior change creates unstoppable momentum. So what does it look like to actually, unlock your margin for ministry? What does this look like as a real engagement as you start to bring this shared language together, tailored to you? None of this is cookie cutter. None of this is, prescribed solutions of any kind. This is, hey, how does your church operate and what are the problems that your church is dealing with and how do we identify and solve those? So one is a tailored workshop where we create that shared language. We really focus on clear problem solving objectives. We set those outcomes. And then typically what happens is we start with a 3 to 4 month planning horizon just to get the rhythm, just to get that behavior and those quick wins and a momentum that helps you start to create that lasting behavior. And then how do we start to, coach through behaviors? How do we turn outcomes into activities? How do we build a scorecard? How do we solve root problems? How do we sustain this rhythm? This becomes something that provides support to where you have that shared language, but it doesn't just become a strategy that sits on the shelf. It becomes something that says, great, now we know where we're going. Let's work together on understanding what it looks like to actually turn this into action. And these become two core focuses that we work together on to make sure that it's not just a strategy on the shelf, but it is an aligned achievement and outcome that you're driving towards, and your team and your congregation are understanding how to turn this into consistent behaviors. When working with other churches, these are the things that we hear is, hey, we're identifying core areas through a wide range of different things. For this church specifically, it was a 1 year plan across outreach, stewardship, governance, building expansion, facilitation, increasing their community impact, and turning vision into action. Again, this is not a cookie cutter approach. This is, hey, how do we look at your church across the board and understand across those three functions what is the needed shared language? What are the problems to solve? And how do we know if we solved it? So the way that this looks is, a live workshop, coaching, tools that you can use, such as your desired future dashboard and different templates. And because this is kind of an introductory thing with Tithely and we're working together on really enhancing that expanded value for you all as churches to really start to translate that strategy into action, it's just a flat rate of $5,000 plus the travel, which includes the workshop, the coaching, the tools, and everything that we talked about here today, limited to 10 churches for this particular initiative and this program. And then if you guys are interested in talking through that, I'd love to just have, a 30-minute conversation with you, learn more about your church, some of the things that you're dealing with. No cost to you to have that discussion. I just want to learn more about that and to see if there's a way I can add value to what you're already doing. You're already serving your mission. You're already progressing the kingdom of God forward. And my objective and my goal is just to help expand your capacity to do that even more, as we're all stewards and managers of God's money and his resources. And I just want to help you maximize that in every way that we can just to serve him better. So if you feel like this is helpful, and something you'd love to continue the conversation on, I'd love to talk to you. Mark, I'll pass it back to you just to kind of
Awesome.
close this out.
Yeah, thanks so much, Matt. Yeah, I know that as you guys are listening, you're hearing a lot of tactics and tools and ways to like improve your ministry, right? Like, I know there's a lot to think through, and this may be something where you want to get this content over to another member of your team. We're going to have this recording sent over to you so you can take it, you can, absorb it, and you can really think on what this practically looks like at your church, as you work to build out some of these frameworks that we've talked about today. And if you want to chat more with Matt, I really encourage you guys to do that. He's proven himself to be available and ready and able to help churches grow and build their impact. So I would encourage that. We'll send along his contact information as well. So if you guys had any questions, you're welcome to ask those questions over to us. We're happy to get those to Matt right now, and we can answer those. So I did have a question real fast for you, Matt. As you think through, we've talked through a couple like scenarios here, but as you kind of are working with churches, like what do you kind of feel is one of the leading reasons or one of the leading challenges that you're seeing in churches today when it comes to this idea of planning and execution? Like, what would you say are some of those leading challenges?
Absolutely. So, when it comes to a business that's doing this type of planning, one of the advantages that a business often has is that they have employees, they have salaried employees, they have, for-profit organizations, and everyone feels like they're obligated to move towards that direction, right? And it's
Hmm.
kind of an
Hmm.
understood thing as a business. One of the difficulties that a church often has is it's not always a paid staff member. Sometimes it's a volunteer, sometimes it's a
Yeah.
member or somebody that you're wanting to engage in a different thing. And it becomes even a layer more complex on helping them understand what role do they play and also helping them own it and want to be held accountable to
Yeah.
move it forward. So with churches, what I have found is not only do you have sometimes more limited resources they're able to steward and manage towards the achievement you want to have, but you're also dealing with that added layer of sometimes dealing with a volunteer that you're trying to hold accountable and move forward towards an objective, or even a member that wants to understand how is their money being used, how is their
Yeah.
money being invested towards different things. So this type of planning to be even ultra clear on where are we going, what are we trying to transform into, and how is this going to expand our ability to share the love of Christ and to pursue our mission and our vision forward as a church is even more critical because that
Mhm.
clarity is what brings ownership. That clarity is what helps someone understand how they're going to steward themselves well to help support the church and how they're going to be utilized in a way that pursues their mission, right? And pursues their ministry
Yeah.
forward. So, businesses in my mind are even easier, right? Churches have
Yeah.
have added layers that they have to balance. So when it comes to having this kind of clarity, and in my mind, it becomes even more important to be able to have that shared ownership of how everybody plays a part and how it ultimately ties back to that larger transformation.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a great point. Does anybody resonate with that, right? Like I work with churches of all sizes, right? And I'll always ask people like, what role do you do here at the church? And they're like, well, it depends on what hour you're asking me that
Right.
question because
Which
I
hat do you
am
want? Yeah.
right. Yeah, so wearing so many hats. So that sounds so familiar. So um, cool. Well, thanks, Matt. Thanks for your time. I really appreciate it, and thank you everybody for attending. Like we said, this webinar recording will go out, and along with some contact with Matt. If any of this information really resonated with you, I hope that you reach out to Matt or let us know if you have any questions, and we'll be happy to walk alongside you in any of that. It is our heart here at Tithely to walk alongside you as you serve your community. So if there's any way that we can do that better, please let us know. We'll be happy to chat more with you about that. But thank you again, and everyone have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye,
Perfect.
everyone.
Thank you all. Have a great week.